Hello and welcome to this game review. We'll have a look at this game and we'll try to take away at least one thing to learn. And in this game I think it would be a lead in development and how to punish our opponent's opening principle violations. So it started as the Sicilian. We got some kind of dragon. White is playing Italian style, but now white cannot play d4 anymore, which means white cannot really aim for an advantage. So castles d6. Knight f6 is also fine, but d6, okay. And white plays this very strange move, knight e2. The idea might be to play d4 or c3 d4. And there was a question about e5, but e5 stopping knight f4 is not entirely necessary. The knight on f4 will not really be doing anything at all. But e5 might be logical to stop d4 at some point. Though probably the most sensible way to play is not to block this bishop. It's to just develop the pieces, castle, and generally the plan is to play on the queen side, rook b8, b5, a5, a4, moves like this, try to create something there. So knight g5 castles. Yeah, knight g5 is also not doing much, and after knight f4, black is actually close to winning, because white is not really creating any threats, he's only moving around his pieces, and at this point, black can easily win a pawn with e5. The pawn will be the one on e4. So first we take this knight away, for example knight e5, and now we can just play h6 for example, though probably even better is knight e5 because g5 is hanging, so knight e5 is not really possible. After knight e2 there's h6, and next we can take the pawn on e4, and black is doing very well. So generally when our opponent is moving around the same piece twice, we should be looking for tactics in the center, because he is losing time, he's not developing his pieces. h6 is played. This is also fine. After knight f3 we can just win the pawn on e4. There is one small tactical point. Knight g6 is possible, but after d5, knight f8 and taking the bishop, this knight is trapped, so black will again get two pieces for the rook. So a similar theme. White is not really developing, he's leaving his pawn on e4. Black should take advantage. Instead, bishop g4 was played, though this does blunder knight g6, which is only possible because h6 was played. So a few moves pass, and white is not getting time to develop, and again we should find some kind of plan. So at this point, white's threat is knight g6. Wait, actually knight g6 is not a threat. We can probably just take the pawn on e4. Here white can take this one because he's attacking the knight, but after, for example, going back, we have exchanged the central pawn for the b pawn, which should be better for black. Here black played b6, which is very passive, and in general this pawn is not even hanging, so we shouldn't really waste time like this. The most natural continuation is to attack on the queen side, rook b8, maybe b5, a6, b5, and this is the standard plan for black, just doing something with this bishop, especially when white is undeveloped like this. But a few moves pass, and later the position gets a bit chaotic, and here this is the next fragment. Black played rook c7 quite quickly, but here black has two candidate moves, right? There is rook b8, rook c7. We can also insert c4, but rook b8 is a lot stronger. Now this bishop is basically trapped. After bishop a6, b5, if the bishop takes, there is a6, and the bishop is pinned and will be taken. Otherwise, there's not much for white to do about this. So black could have won the game here, but rook c7 was played, and in general this is a 10+0 game. I would suggest playing longer time controls, but that's besides the point. Bishop a6, and a few moves later, some very strange decisions by both sides happened. Here, for example, black gave up his exchange, but perhaps he didn't see that he can take en passant. After which, black is not really in trouble. He can play bishop e3 to win the exchange, but now at least we got two pawns for the exchange. But rook b5, and here white is winning had he played bishop e3, but rook king h1. And a few moves later we got a rook endgame, after a few more mistakes by both sides. And this is the last fragment. And the best way to play rook endgames is to play actively, and here black played rook d8, and only then he played rook b5, but this is maybe not the most precise. He could play rook b8 right away, and after the active continuation, something like this. Black is a pawn down, but he should be fine. His rook is very active, and this is the most important thing. So instead rook d8, and a few moves later we got the same position basically, and here the game should be drawn, but white is a little bit better since he has a pawn. These pawns are getting exchanged, and this is probably the moment where black should have made the draw a bit easier. He took on g2, which allowed white to cut off the king on the first rank, but probably rook c5 is a bit better. After this, rook b5, and white is not going to be able to make progress. So rook g2, rook a7, and a few moves later white was winning. Here rook h2 is somehow a draw, but it's not that obvious. Well then, at the end of this, white found a way to win. Here the most obvious win is to play like this, picking up these pawns, and at the end white will win with his e-pawn. Though king d6, here black had the chance to take this pawn again, but at this point it was big time pressure, and black did not manage to defend, and black won on time here, but of course the position is lost anyway.